Talk more about the country's rather complicated, shall we say, coalition arrangements. We're joined today by Wayne Sussman, an elections analyst, with me in studio. Wayne, good to see you. Johannesburg has not been short of drama when you look at coalitions, and they're running the ANC in, out, now back in again. And it all comes down to it being a numbers game, doesn't it?
Correct. So the local government elections in 2021 saw no party come close to 50%, no party having enough seats to form an outright majority, which is a continuation of what we saw in 2016, where Herman Mashaba, then with the DA, was elected mayor, and then he was tossed out and the ANC came back in with quite a number of mayors. Sadly, a lot of them passed away. And so you saw this kind of instability between 2016 and 2021. What's one of the key differences between 2021 onward and that previous period of 2016 to 2021? The two largest parties, the ANC and the DA, lost ground in the city of Johannesburg after the 2021 local government elections. That means they needed to find more coalition partners. And Dr. Populati got elected in November 2021 with a wide array of parties. Later on, the Gayton Mackenzie's Patriotic Alliance joins, and that short-lived coalition, that short-lived alliance of quite a diverse range of parties, came spectacularly undone this week, and we see Dada Morero elected as the mayor of the city of Johannesburg. This is a victory for the ANC and its coalition partners today.
And actually, I say Herman Mashaba was on the channel earlier, and he says it all comes down to arrogance on the part of the DA because it had the largest share, if you will, of the coalition's votes. It wanted to dictate every bit of the running of the agreement. And, for example, they say the DA would not give in to the suggestion or request for an IFP candidate to be speaker. But how do you balance that then? The wishes and desires of the party with the largest share of the cake, but not an outright majority, and the minority who help that party stay in power.
Correct. So again, we have to take a step back. This is very difficult to analyze. So on the one hand, Mashaba is saying that if the DA was less greedy, we could have saved this thing. And then the DA are saying, but look, there was a coalition agreement with an amendment when the Patriotic Alliance came in, and this deal is less than a year old. We should have stuck to that agreement. So you have these two different narratives dominating today, and ultimately those parties, some are saying it's the DA's arrogance, some are saying that the Action SA and the Patriotic Alliance were not willing to stick to the agreement, the coalition agreement, deviating from it. So a lot of people are throwing stones at each other. Well, what does this mean in numbers? We see the Patriotic Alliance get off the Palazzi-led bus, and they've climbed onto the ANC bus now in the city of Johannesburg. That is significant. They're a party with 8 seats. We are seeing Colleen Makubele and her co-party. They initially backed the DA. They have also she's jumped ship and got onto the ANC bus. So these are, you're seeing breakdown in trust, a breakdown in relationships, and this is why we're seeing this change in leadership today.
And just on that point, I mean, Colleen Makubele, the speaker now, has been speaking a lot in her battles, especially with the DA-led coalition, about how the disrespect for parties with a 0 point whatever, a share of the vote. But do you think coalitions have reshaped the measure of power and influence beyond how many seats you have in council? Because you can have 34, but if we're all able to come together and come to 36, your 34 means very little.
Correct. So on the one hand, let's say the position of Speaker is a fundamentally important position in the City Council. I would say after the mayorship, the mayoral position, it's the most important position because that person dictates the business of council. That person can determine whether an issue is a priority or lower down the pecking order. So the DA are saying that a party, it's the largest party, it has the rightful game. Whereas Makubele are saying, without us smaller parties, without my 1 seat, you would not have defeated the ANC when we voted for mayor in November. So these are the contrasting debates and discussions which we're going to see going forward. And this happened a few days ago, by the way, in Nelson Mandela Bay. We are seeing a lot of change across the landscape. If the change is going to result in better service delivery for our residents and better service delivery for the ratepayers and better service delivery for the people who work in the city of Johannesburg and the city of Nelson Mandela Bay, that's fine. But if it's going to result in more dysfunction, whether it's Nelson Mandela Bay, Johannesburg, or other parts of the South Africa, I'm worried that more and more South Africans will turn off from participating in elections and participating in our democracy. That's why it's very key that in the coming weeks and months, South Africans see that coalitions can work for the betterment of services and all residents.
And how do we even begin to measure that, Wayne, when you consider how frequently power is changing hands in Nelson Mandela Bay, in Johannesburg? Because ultimately, at the end of the 5 years, everyone goes, well, Wayne wrecked it in his 6 months, and we came in, only had a year, and couldn't undo all the wrong.
Correct. So we saw turbulence between 2016 and 2021. We are now less than a year since the last local government elections, and we've already seen two major shifts in power in two of the metros of South Africa and shifts in power across South Africa. This points to instability. So, will we be able to see these coalitions agree on a common these new coalitions on a common course of action and implement policies which they can agree on and show results which are tangible and which the public and the people who live in those cities can see are making a difference to their lives?
You used the word I liked earlier, greed. Is that what's going to kill coalition politics in South Africa?
Well, greed can kill cities. Greed can kill towns. Greed can kill municipalities. We need to remember that voters queued for hours on the 1st of November 2021 to elect leadership. We need to take a step back. The people who've been elected council need to take a step back and say, when we shift allegiances, when we shift power, are we doing this to benefit ourselves, or are we doing it to benefit those who voted for us and possibly for other parties in early November 2021? And that is going to be absolutely key in the coming months. And let's also remember, we're talking about coalitions in local government. This is everything to do with power. This is everything to do with positions. But we've also got to have our eye on the 2024 elections. What has happened this week has got fundamental importance on the road to the 2024 elections.
What about, you mentioned the possible effect of this being discouraging, basically, to people going to vote, because you vote for one thing, you get something completely different. But when you look at 2024, do you think this will then galvanize more people to go out and perhaps convince South Africans that what we need is a decisive victory or loss for whatever party?
Correct. So I think if the ANC and the majority of the provinces of South Africa and the DA in the Western Cape, that's going to be a fundamental argument. Coalitions bring chaos, therefore you need one party to dominate. The results of the 2021 local government elections, where the ANC was the largest party with 36% of the vote, points to the fact that there's a very strong likelihood that we're going to see coalitions. What we've seen in the last few days in the city of Johannesburg, we'll see if it plays out in Ekurhuleni, is that parties like the Patriotic Alliance are saying, we are willing to work with the ANC. Could the Patriotic Alliance, Gayton McKenzie and Kenny Kunani's Patriotic Alliance, be the kingmakers in Gauteng politics in 2024? These are some of the big shifts we've seen this week, and South Africans are going to have to get used to a lot of new names and faces who might play a decisive role in our national and provincial politics.
Just on the point of stability, I'm just pointing now to the issue, or casting our eyes forward to 2024. If we do get a national coalition government and the ANC dips below that 50+1 margin, could we go the direction of Israel, for example? I was talking about this earlier, where they've had 5 elections in 3 years, and that then creates a certain degree of instability. And with every poll, fewer people are going out to vote because they're saying, well, it's not working.
Correct. So Israel is split totally down the middle. Just one thing about Israel is that they have a threshold of 3.25% to get into the parliament. So that was one of the things I was testing today about stability. If it was harder for small parties to get in, would that bring more stability? I.e., if you needed 3.25% like in Israel to get into the council, the provincial legislature, the parliament, would that bring more stability? It hasn't done so in Israel. As you said, they're going to another election. but maybe you would be able to build more stable coalitions because less smaller parties would be able to hold the bigger parties to ransom.
But in South Africa, that would exclude a lot of people, because when you look at the voting patterns, even nationally, you have a clear top 5, but beyond that, everyone's numbers just go lower and lower and lower.
And after the last local government elections, we've seen many smaller or regional parties become mayors in small towns because of their 1 or 2 seats. So correct, this is a very fine line. Ultimately, we need to make sure that when politicians are elected at a local level, a provincial level, or in a national parliamentary level, that they always have the voters and the citizens, the residents at hand. And that's going to be key for these politicians to show voters in the next few months and years.
Wayne Sussman, always a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you.
Thank you.